Welcome back. By now, through these videos, you've hopefully started to become familiar with the idea and comfortable with the idea that learning is a cyclic process. So we've given a couple of models from that. One model is the brain model. Right? So sensory input, post-sensory cortex does its thing, passes that information on the temporal cortex, does its thing, passes to the frontal integrative cortex. That's the higher level thinking part where we're problem solving, et cetera, critical thinking and so on. That passes that on motor and premotor and motor cortex, which then results in some output. And the important thing in terms of a cycle is you must complete the cycle. That's what this action and causing another sensory input is all about. So that's the brain model I briefly introduced before. How does this relate to Kolb's learning cycle? And the answer is very, very well. So the concrete experience of Kolb kind of matches up here with the idea of a sensory input. Whatever that experience is, and the brain's coming over here, reflective observation, it's more or less what the temporal integrative cortex is doing. Drawing those initial relationships and things like that, reflecting upon whatever that input was. That then, remember in Kolb, it goes to abstract conceptualization, which is this idea of problem solving, et cetera, those kinds of things. It's exactly what the frontal cortex is doing. And then active testing, that's what's coming out here. And again, as a cycle, remember this active testing, whatever that action is, results in another concrete experience. So those two models match up very nicely. What's it have to do with teaching? This is where we start to get into the idea of how do these models relate to teaching? This is learning. How do they relate to teaching? So let me take this approach. Go back to our brain model and think of inside and outside the brain. What's outside the brain, the parts of the cycle, what are inside the brain, parts of the cycle. I cannot go into your brain with a nano screwdriver and tweak some part of your brain and all of a sudden you know something, you've learned something. I wish I could do that, but I cannot do that. All right? So we as teachers don't have direct access to what's going on in our students' brains. On the other hand, we do have indirect access. We can control what the sensory input is. We can control what we ask them to do for motor output in response to the sensory input that we gave them. And importantly, and this is one of the parts that many times we don't do a great job on, is helping them go from here, starting another sensory input, and helping the student complete this cycle again and again and again. So part of this idea of student-centered learning is exactly this, is our role as facilitators of learning, partner in the process of learning, comes into play here, especially in this part right here. Here's another model, another conceptual model. And this one involves learning changes our brain and transforms our behavior. So learning related to behavioral change. Learning is behavioral change. So stimulus by the instructor. The instructor provides some sort of stimulus, results in a response from the student. That response from the student then, hopefully the instructor is reinforcing whatever that was, providing feedback, which results in another stimulus by the instructor, resulting in another response. And again, you can see it's another kind of a cycle here, isn't it? Learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of experience. Again, that word of experience coming into play there. Can we put that model on top of the other ones? The brain model, the answer is absolutely yes. This really defines what I'm talking about with regard to the quote, outside of the brain part of the brain model. Stimulus provided by the instructor, well, that's exactly what sensory input is. Response by the student, that's what the motor output is. And again, reinforcement provided by the instructor. That's helping the student start another cycle and go ahead through hopefully multiple cycles. So that model fits very nicely too. And again, emphasizes this idea that there are 3 points at which we as teachers can impact what's going on in the student's brain here, what's going in, what's coming out, and then how can we then take advantage of what's coming out and help that student start another cycle. Okay, you're probably sitting there, some of you are sitting there saying, yeah, but Walt, I did most of my learning without going through all these cycles. Well, actually you did. So let me give you an idea. I have the same thought myself. Typical classroom, teacher-centered learning environment. Lecturer, just like I'm doing now. Topic 1, come back another day. Topic 2, come back another day. Topic 3, et cetera, down along the way. And then somewhere along the line, there's this thing called an exam, the summative assessment of learning, at the end of that learning process. That's what the instructor's doing. What's the student doing? Hopefully they're sitting in the classroom taking notes, listening at least, and hopefully taking notes. Come back the next time, take notes. Next time, take notes. Next time, take notes. Not a lot of processing time going on in that classroom. Not a lot of time to think about that, have that reflective observation, have that abstract concept, all those kinds of things, those parts of the cycle. Not a lot of time. Things are going in, and that's about it. So when is the learning really happening? I don't know about you, but I know when it happened with me. It happened back here when I was cramming for the exam, when I was studying for the exam. I go back to these notes and I go through them again and again and again and again. That's where the cycles come in. I was doing the cycles for me. My instructor was not doing the cycles. The instructor was simply, here's information. Essentially saying, here's information, now go learn it. And when did I learn it? I learned it here. I did the cycling part myself. So again, a lot of times the students are cramming for exams and maybe they're prepared and maybe they're not prepared for that exam. So to emphasize again this idea that there are 3 points as teachers that we can impact what's going on in terms of the learning process of the student, what's going on in the brain, but over the overall learning process, this whole cycle. What we put in, the stimulus, the response we expect from our students and motor output, and then reinforcement. What kind of feedback and reinforcement do I give that student to help them start another cycle? Now, I have another assignment for you, and I want to make sure that you do this before you start watching the next video. That's important. Take a piece of paper and write down these 6 words, just exactly like that. Analyze, apply, create, evaluate, remember, understand. Take a piece of paper, blank piece of paper hopefully, and write down these 6 words. Analyze, apply, create, evaluate, remember, understand. Then what I want you to do is I want you to rank those with respect to what you think they are in terms of the level of thinking. So a 1 would be the lowest level of thinking. A 6, because there's only 6 words, would be the highest level of thinking. So amongst these things, you'll have a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, and a 6. So again, the words are in alphabetical order. Analyze, apply, create, evaluate, remember, understand. Those are your 6 words. Rank them. Lowest level of thinking is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 is your highest level of thinking, whatever that is. So do that, and then keep that for the next video.